Hi, everyone, and welcome to Big Business This Week. I'm Dave Briggs on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Just back from assignment in Dubai. We brought the NBA Emirates Cup back with us and spoke with one of the most powerful people in sports today upon our return, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. We discussed the league partnership with Emirates Airlines, why the league chose Amazon over TNT, and how his league has dunked on the competition in terms of social media. The NBA has more followers than its U.S. competitors combined. Listen. Your followers doubled the NHL, the Major League Baseball combined. Why have you guys distanced yourself so far, social media-wise, from the other leagues? What are you doing differently than the other leagues?
You know, I would just say I don't make those comparisons to other leagues,
No,
honestly,
it
because
was hard
good
data.
for the other leagues, and I think
it was hard data.
I accept that, but that's not, at the league office, we're not sitting around comparing ourselves to other leagues. I mean, and frankly, you know, while I'm a fan of other sports and, you know, rooting for them, we compare ourselves sort of to frankly the biggest brands in the world. We were 2 years ago, we were one of the top 5 search terms on Google globally. The NBA, its teams, its players. I mean, so it's not just, I feel it's almost too limiting just to compare us to another sport league and when there's a global market for entertainment and sport. I think in terms of social media, we have a particularly young fan base. I mean, most important number, rather than relative to other leagues, there's something like 2 billion people on a planet of 8 billion or 7.5 billion who connect with the NBA in some way, and over 1 billion people who will watch some portion of a game. So that's particularly exciting to us. You know, after soccer, we're the number 2 sport in the world and most likely the fastest growing sport in the world. So we just came off an incredible Olympics in France, you know, where we had 140 NBA and WNBA players competing. Of course, you had USA, France, and 2 gold medal games, men's and women's. So, as I said, I think the best days are ahead of this league, that people love this sport. We're being embraced culturally and by governments around the world because it's boys, it's girls, it's men's and women, it's physical activity, it teaches people important values of equality, of egalitarianism, you know, of fitness. So we're really pleased with the state of the game.
So you compare yourselves to Apple and the biggest companies on the planet?
Well, we compare when it comes to brand recognition, absolutely. And we compare
Starbucks,
to engagement and how our customers, in our case fans, connect with us. Definitely. I mean, I think it would be too limiting. And again, I don't knock on the other leagues, and I don't sit around saying us versus the other leagues because I hope they're doing the same thing. Their goal isn't to be bigger than the NBA. Their goal, and some of them are, of course, bigger than the NBA. Their goal is to compete for a global audience, and we see it that way. If there are 8 billion people in the world, and we're 2 billion are connecting on digital social media, there's 6 billion we're not connecting with. That's how I look at it.
Incredible journey to Dubai and conversation with Commissioner Silver. Our thanks to him and the NBA and Emirates. Don't miss my full interview on Power Players, airing Friday, 8 p.m. right here on Cheddar. Meanwhile, tectonic shifts in the nation's capital as President-elect Trump met with President Joe Biden in the Oval Office this week in what appeared to be a rather cordial meeting. And there are some notable, if not shocking, names potentially joining Trump's cabinet. Here with perspective is Rob Shroeder from MarketWatch. Rob, good to see you, sir. Wow, what a couple of days. The nomination of Florida Senator Marco Rubio as Trump's Secretary of State really seemed to calm the markets, the fears of Trump critics, for about 5 minutes. That's until the stunning selection of Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. The timing, little on the background, suspicious to say the least. For those unfamiliar, Rob, what should Americans need to know about Gaetz and the investigations into him?
Well, Dave, yes, it's good to be with you. And as you said, these nominations or these names are coming out really fast and furious. Congressman Gaetz for Attorney General certainly came as a shock and not universally well received on Capitol Hill, even among some of his fellow Republicans. He was seen as a kind of not exactly a surprise, perhaps to everyone, but certainly to some. And you mentioned that there was an investigation into him that was opened and closed. The House was about to release a report on him. That now may or may not come out. We'll see. But he has to go through confirmation process. And the difficulty there could be that this gets reopened or certainly questioned about in some way. So yeah, it doesn't look like smooth sailing on the Attorney General front. There's still, however, several key economic appointments that have not been made yet, perhaps coming down the pike as soon as this week. So we're on high alert for them.
Yeah, we'll circle back to those in a minute, but not just investigations. Gates has been accused of sex trafficking minors. This is no minor accusation, pun unintended there. He's also one of the most disliked members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. A lot of questions here, Rob. One, is he perhaps a sacrificial lamb that might guarantee Trump's other picks if he says, all right, I'll give up that one if you give me the rest of my picks? Or is it solely to end the investigation into Gates? Or the third option, is this actually the direction Trump intends to take? And finally, John Thune, he is an adult. He is a respected Republican. Again, both sides of the aisle. Would he draw the line here?
As you say, Dave, really, there are lots of possibilities here. I don't pretend to have a direct pipeline into President-elect Trump's thinking. But yeah, I think that every president, any president, can't expect to have all of his or her picks confirmed. So with the early tea leaves not looking so great for Congressman Gates, he could wind up being sort of sacrificed, as you suggest. And the Senate, with the new majority leader, will have obviously their role to play here. There's hearings, then there's full Senate confirmation, and so on. But there's also the possibility that President-elect Trump just wants to go full MAGA, let's say, full Make America Great Again with these picks. And certainly Matt Gaetz has been a loyalist. He's been described as pugnacious, even to and by, I think, some of his fellow Republicans. So it could very well be that, okay, Republicans fall in line because they don't want to get the nascent Trump administration part two off to a hobbled start. But there's a lot of time between now and the inauguration. There's plenty of time for members to make their voices heard. And I suspect that we're going to be hearing quite a bit of that over these next 2 months.
My prediction is no way, no chance Gates gets confirmed unless, of course, he is a recess appointment, which would bypass that process. Again, my guess here, just one man's opinion, John Thune, would not allow that to happen, but we are in extraordinary times, as you know, Rob. So ordinarily, choosing a Fox News host for a Secretary of Defense would be the single pick setting off alarm bells. He is a Harvard and Princeton educated veteran. Credit there. But many of his statements, let alone lack of any leadership experience, raise serious concerns. What can you tell us about the man who might lead our military?
That's right. That appointment came as a surprise to some as well. There have been plenty of quotes out there saying, respect the guy. Certainly his credentials are stellar. But is he qualified to lead the massive bureaucracy that is known as the Department of Defense? You know, U.S. troops, obviously, around the world, you're dealing with defense contracts, big companies, a tremendous management undertaking, really, for anybody who's named to this post. So I don't know that one will be a slam dunk either. There may be some trepidation in some corners about that. I think the minimum that we can expect are very, very intense, thoughtful, perhaps contentious nomination hearings when these things do get to the Senate, both defense, justice, and later on with Treasury, whoever the president-elect does name to that post.
There will undoubtedly be hours of Fox News footage dug up, but on the record, he has criticized women in the military, gays in the military, and called in a book Democrats the enemy from within. And that's just as we get this process underway. Meanwhile, former Democratic Congresswoman turned Trump loyalist Tulsi Gabbard, nominated for Director of National Intelligence. Here's what Representative Abigail Spanberger wrote. She is a former CIA officer, mind you. She said she was appalled by Gabbard's selection and said not only is she ill-prepared and unqualified, but she traffics in conspiracy theories and cozies up to dictators like Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin. A rather unusual choice for Director of National Intelligence, to say the least, Rob.
That's right. If I recall, there was some discussion. I believe she made a trip back in 2017 to the Middle East that is getting some renewed attention. But once again, I think what former Congresswoman Gabbard has in common with some of these other picks is that she's been very loyal to President-elect Trump, and for quite some time now. She was a former Democrat. She ran in the Democratic primaries a while ago, and has since changed not only her outlook but her party. So you do see this sort of pattern emerging here of loyalty to President Trump. However, loyalty to one man doesn't necessarily get you confirmation in the Senate. So that is certainly one pick to keep our eyes on out of the many here that, as again, I would say, sort of go full MAGA, let's call it.
Yeah, loyalty to Trump appears to be the one common thread throughout the early picks, and those who he said would not serve in his cabinet, including Nikki Haley, which let down many on the right. So Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy now will lead the Department of Government Efficiency. What do we know about this, and why is either one qualified to undertake this operation?
Yeah, that's right. It's as your viewers, Dave, have probably clued in. The Department of Government Efficiency is kind of an acronym for Doge, as in Dogecoin, which is one of the cryptos that Elon Musk has spoken very favorably of. And they, again, to continue on this loyalty theme, are both loyal to President Trump. They have spoken favorably of him and appeared with him and so on. Obviously, both very successful businessmen. Elon Musk, of course, with Tesla, SpaceX, and the like. Vivek Ramaswamy in the investment sector. So their charge, however, is not perhaps able to live up to the hype surrounding it. These are big names, but when you read the fine print, it's up to Congress, really, to fund these federal agencies. And neither Mr. Musk nor Mr. Ramaswamy are members of Congress at the end of the day. They will be making recommendations. They'll be sort of acting as, let's call it, outside consultants to the federal government, working, I believe it is, with the Office of Management and Budget, which is part of the executive branch. So while the billboard may be shining very brightly here on this type of new agency, new charge, and so on, there's many steps to take, many I's to dot and T's to cross as they go about their business, and not to mention time. I believe that President Trump charged them with producing a final report in about a year and a half or more. So nothing really moves quickly in Washington, or it seldom does, and I don't think this will be an exception.
Extraordinary times continue. Always good to see you. MarketWatch's Rob Schroeder with us there. Thanks so much. Coming up, Bitcoin had a big week, catching the attention of many down here on Wall Street. All-time highs after a quick break. Hey everyone, welcome back to Big Business This Week. Many call this the crypto election, and the days since we are seeing why. The crypto industry plowed $119 million into the election, and since Trump's win last week, Bitcoin is up more than 30% to an all-time high. Why? Managing Director at CoinDesk Indices, Andy Baer, here to answer that question. It is a staggering amount, sir. Great to have you here at the New York Stock Exchange. Bitcoin shot up to 94,000. It's still hovering around 90 to an all-time high.
Right.
For those that are just trying to figure this out, why?
The Bitcoin is coming on 16 years old now. In the last year, it had a lot to do in the United States, right? This time last year, Bitcoin was in the 30s. We were anticipating spot ETFs launched here at the New York Stock Exchange and other exchanges, which would give US investors easy access. That was one of four things Bitcoin needed to get done this year. The ETFs launched on January 11th. They now have about 90 billion of AUM, so that was successful. Bitcoin had to do its halving, which is a technical term for changing the rewards it pays to miners. It got that done in the springtime.
Let's pause on that one.
Yep.
Halving, in layman's terms, meaning what?
So one of the great things about Bitcoin and the way it can be decentralized and have security is to provide incentive to those who keep it secure, right? So millions of computers, and people use the term Bitcoin miners, that's what they do. They provide security by looking at transactions that take place and achieving consensus. That's the trade that happened. Yes, we'll generate consensus on that. Some of those miners will get rewards. So those rewards are new Bitcoin that get created. Every once in a while, the number of Bitcoin that is offered for the services goes in half, right? And that just means there's more security. We don't need to pay their miners as much. The halvings happen every 4 years. They happen to happen every election year, which causes some confusion about sentiment. Yeah. But the halving this year went off without a hitch. Miners are still profitable, right?
And number three was?
Number three is that in the interest rate environment, Bitcoin likes when future real interest rates are low, right? So that's high inflation, low nominal rates. We were covered pretty well on the inflation side, but with the Fed raising rates back in 2022, that caused a headwind. So the beginning of an easing cycle, which I think many financial markets were anticipating this year, that was something that we needed to see happen. On September 18th, the 50 basis point cut was the first assertive step, and that helped Bitcoin get out of its sort of summer slump this year. The fourth thing, of course, was regulatory pavement, right? We need better regulation, more regulation. People make the mistake of saying we don't want regulation. The digital asset industry just needs better regulation, and there are plenty of other regimes where that is the case. The election and the president-elect's frequent mention of Bitcoin makes it clear that regulatory progress is in the cards.
Gary Gensler, fresh in your resume. What type of regulation does this industry need?
Yeah, it's a little easier in other regimes. We have the CFTC and the SEC, and they were never combined together, right? So Bitcoin right now is regulated by the CFTC as a commodity. The SEC has claimed regulatory coverage of some other digital assets, thinking that they're securities. And so it's kind of like two outfielders, trying to catch a fly ball, and they both miss it and it lands on the grass. That's what's happening here. If you look at the regulation that's being designed in Europe or in the APAC region, in Hong Kong and Singapore, they regulate virtual assets. They regulate specific tokens. They regulate exchanges, asset managers. We need that kind of pavement here so that new projects and big tokens can trade without fear of being mischaracterized.
I mentioned Bitcoin all-time high. Where do you expect it to go? Are you looking at 100,000 in the next?
Well,
I'll let you fill in the blanks.
That's right. There are some fantastic derivatives markets for Bitcoin, including options markets. The CME runs an options on futures market in the United States. There are tons of offshore options markets, and that 100,000 strike, it's so close now. It was an active strike price even when Bitcoin was at 50,000, 60,000, 70,000. We're so close. Like here, when the Dow gets close to X 10,000, people make a run for it. So it could happen anytime. Once that psychology is out of the way, we'll have to see where the next level of support is.
Good to see you, sir. Our thanks to Andy Baer, Managing Director at CoinDesk Indices. Fascinating times for digital currencies. Coming up, the business stories you may have missed this week, including what's going on with Spirit Airlines. Welcome back to Big Business This Week. I'm Dave Briggs here at the New York Stock Exchange. Time now to bring in Peter Green to talk about the business stories you may have missed this week. Good to see you, my friend. Let's start with Spirit Airlines after shares plunged this week when the company announced they would not announce quarterly results. What are we learning?
Well, Spirit's been crushed, man. It's just terrible. They had planned to merge with JetBlue back in January, but a judge overseeing the competition case said that he thought that would reduce competition in the U.S. airline space. So he barred that merger. Then Frontier was going to buy Spirit, but Spirit just keeps having problems. They're a low-cost airline, which means there's not a lot of revenue, and costs just keep going up, whether it's fuel, whether it's planes, whether it's trying to get more passengers for their no-frills flying. They're not doing well. Passenger traffic is down, operating profit margins are down. They've had to lay off or furlough about 300 pilots. They did a sale leaseback with a whole bunch of their airplanes so they could get some cash to pay down debt. And they've got $1 billion worth of debt that's coming due over the next 12 months. If they can't deal with that, they're out of business. So right now they've asked for bankruptcy protection, or at least they're preparing for it, according to the Wall Street Journal. But they've also told everybody that Frontier no longer wants to marry them for now. So there's not a lot of options out there for this carrier.
Yeah, and the bad news for them appears to be good news for others. JetBlue has skyrocketed on that bad news, up 17% in the last 5 days. One company that did post earnings and found some positive response, Disney. What can you tell us about the House of Mouse and their report?
Well, there's two really big things there. One is the massive growth in the number of streaming subscribers. The cable business keeps declining. People don't want to pay the month on month for all those channels they don't watch. They're switching to the streaming services. Analysts and Disney said they thought they'd get about 900,000 new subscribers this year. They got 5 times that, 4.4 million. Okay, that's global, but it's still pretty big. I think they're in 175 million households around the world. They're in about 1 out of 3 US households. Blanket coverage, lots of people watching the streaming service. It's kind of a juggling, different ways of getting their entertainment assets across. The great thing about streaming is that you can keep your whole library available to people and it just comes up on demand. Then they've got, there's some slowdown in the amusement parks and the cruise ship business, which is usually the big money spinner. One of the problems was the Paris Olympics. That did not air on ESPN, it was on NBC. And a lot of people didn't go to Paris to Euro Disneyland because the city was full of people there for the Olympics. Moving into the second thing that's going on, Bob Iger's winding up his second term as CEO of the company. He's done an amazing job, keeps innovating, keeps buying, selling, keeping Disney on top of the entertainment world. Well, he's in his mid-70s now and is ready to bow out. Potential new CEO, there's still 3 or 4 in-house contenders and waiting to see, what shapes out from that search. They're not giving themselves a short time limit. They've got, I think, through the middle or end of next year to land on a new CEO. And meanwhile, share prices are up 8.5% this morning after announcing this news.
Interesting that the company offering guidance on 25, 26, and 2027, a rather unusual play for Disney. Our thanks to Peter Green. Make sure to subscribe to Cheddar's weekly Big Business This Week newsletter by going to cheddar.com/BBTW. Don't go away, much more Cheddar up next.